Good evening, everyone, and it's time for another story. Tonight's story comes from an old countryside tale often told in the storytelling tradition of Leo Tolstoy. It is a quiet story about a king, a poor farmer, and a woman whose wisdom was stronger than any castle wall. So get comfortable, relax your shoulders, and let the story unfold slowly. Long ago, in a wide land of forests, rivers, and small farming villages, there lived a humble peasant and his wife. Their home was simple, just a small wooden cottage at the edge of the fields. In the morning, the farmer worked with his ox and plow, turning the dark soil beneath the sun. And beside him, often helping with the work, was his wife. She was known throughout the village not only for her kindness, but for something else. She was wise. If two neighbors argued, they would come to her. If someone could not solve a difficult problem, they would ask her advice. And somehow, she always seemed to find the simplest answers. Word of her wisdom slowly spread from village to village until one day it reached the ears of the king. The king was a powerful ruler who lived in a grand palace surrounded by tall stone walls. He was proud of his intelligence and believed that no one in his kingdom could possibly be wiser than he was. So when he heard the villagers praising the clever peasant woman, he became curious and a little annoyed.
One woman in a tiny village cannot be wiser than the king.
He said to himself. Soon after, the king rode through the countryside with his guards. As they passed through the village, he saw the peasant and his wife working quietly in the fields. The king watched them for a moment. The woman seemed calm, thoughtful, and confident. That made the king even more curious. The next morning, he summoned the peasant to the palace. The farmer had never been inside the palace before. Its enormous gates, shining floor, and echoing halls made him feel very small. At the end of the great hall sat the king on his throne.
So,
The king said, studying him carefully.
I hear your wife is the wisest person in your village.
The peasant shifted nervously. People say many things, Your Majesty, he replied. The king leaned forward with a faint smile.
Then let us test this wisdom.
The peasant's heart sank. The king spoke slowly, as though enjoying every word.
Tomorrow, before the sun sets, you must build me a great castle.
The farmer blinked in confusion. A castle, Your Majesty?
Yes,
Said the king calmly.
a strong castle with tall towers and walls of stone.
The farmer trembled. But, Your Majesty, such a thing would take years. The king waved his hand dismissively.
You have one day. If you fail, you will lose your land.
The peasant left the palace feeling as though the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. All the way home, he kept thinking the same thing. How could anyone build a castle in a single day? When he finally reached the cottage, his wife noticed his troubled face immediately. What happened? She asked gently. The peasant sat down and told her everything. When he finished, he sighed deeply. It is impossible. The king only wants to punish us. But his wife did not look afraid. Instead, she sat quietly for a moment, thinking. Then a smile appeared on her face. Do not worry. The king has given you an impossible task, but impossible tasks often have very simple answers. The next morning, she handed the peasant a small sack filled with seeds. Take this to the king. The farmer looked puzzled. Seeds? Yes, she replied. And when the king asks about his castle, say exactly what I tell you. The farmer trusted his wife, so he went back to the palace carrying the little sack. When he arrived, the king was waiting in the great hall. Well, the king said.
Where is my castle?
The peasant bowed politely. Your Majesty, I'm ready to build a castle today. The king raised an eyebrow.
Oh, then why do you carry a sack?
The peasant opened it and poured the seeds onto the marble floor. Before the king could speak, the farmer said respectfully, but first, Your Majesty, these seeds must grow into tall trees. The king frowned.
What nonsense is this?
The peasant continued calmly. We will need wood for scaffolding, tools and building, and beams to lift the stones. When these seeds grow into large trees today, we can cut them down and begin building your castle. The king stared at him.
That is impossible.
He said sharply.
Seeds cannot grow into trees in one day.
The peasant bowed again. And if trees cannot grow in a day, how can a castle be built in a day? For a moment, the entire hall was silent. The king looked at the seeds, then at the peasant. Slowly, a smile spread across his face. The farmer had answered the challenge perfectly. Finally, the king began to laugh.
So it was your wife who thought of this.
He said. The peasant nodded quietly. The king leaned back in his throne.
It seems the stories about her wisdom are true.
From that day on, the king never again tried to trick the peasant or his wife. Instead, whenever he faced a difficult problem, he sometimes remembered the lesson of the seeds that some demands in life are impossible, and that true wisdom is knowing when to question them. And far away in their small cottage, the farmer and his wife continued living their simple, peaceful life. The fields grew green each spring, the wind moved softly through the trees, and the quiet village returned to its gentle rhythm. Tonight's story reminds us that true wisdom is not about power or wealth. Sometimes the cleverest answers come from the quietest people, and even the most impossible problems can be solved with a calm and thoughtful mind. Let this story fade like the last light of the evening sky and carry you softly into a peaceful sleep. Good night, everyone. I'll see you in the next story.